This episode of the Stockbury Dark is brought to you by Shop Shogun. Shop Shogun is your one-stop shop for the latest and greatest in punk, hardcore, and heavy metal merchandise. Officially licensed web stores from bands such as 100 Demons, Integrity, Disembodied, Madball, Agnostic Front, and many more. The Stockbury Dark, along with Shop Shogun, are offering a special code to discount your next order when you use it on their website. Use the promo code SDPODCAST to save 10% from your next order from Shop Shogun. Again, the code is SDPODCAST. Their website is shopshogun.com. Also, check out their page, Shop Shogun, on Facebook and at Shop Shogun Merch on Instagram.
This is Klaus from the Stockbury Dark. I would like to take the opportunity to thank all of you who's listening, and also thank all of you who's sharing and rating the Stockbury Dark. We touch on subjects that can be hard to express. Sometimes we touch on experiences that are painful to talk about. Hauntings, the occult, the paranormal, and darkness in different shapes. Me and Pete would therefore like to thank all our guests, friends, past and present, for being a part of this. We didn't know what to expect, but the response has been nothing short of fantastic. In all this darkness, you make us glow. Thank you. You can find us at thestockburydark.com, on Podcaster, and on iTunes. For interaction, visit the official Stockbury Dark on Instagram and the Stockbury Dark on Facebook. If you want to get in touch with us, you will reach us at thestockburydark@gmail.com. Please continue to rate us and share our episodes. What we do is for you. Welcome to the Stockbury Dark.
Hello and welcome to the Stockbury Dark. My name is Peter Morrissey.
I'm Klaus out in Stockholm, Sweden. And tonight we have Mikey Flynn from three great bands, the Prowl, Last in Line, and last but not least, Out Cold with us for tonight's episode.
Hey Mike, how's it going, Mike? Thanks for doing the show with us. We're really excited to have you on here tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is great. The podcast is killer.
Yeah, we can't believe it's like, it's taken off. I mean, we can believe it, but it's like doing what we wanted to do and more so, I guess. It's like we've been getting a ton of listeners and really happy with what's been happening. We got super interesting guests and, everyone's kind of like related one way or another to our music scene. And it's just awesome to see like this whole like group of people every week, just like a new person on here and telling these awesome stories that are just outside of all the common things that we share, so that gives a real cool perspective of everyone's life outside of the music scene and into their like darkness of themselves, and it's been really fun so far. And we decided that we were going to do the show bi-weekly when we started, and now we're like it's been rolling so well, we're trying to pump them out once a week for at least the next few months to keep listening up. And but it's been getting easier and easier, so really fucking happy with everything that's been going on.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's great. I probably listened to most of the episodes 2 or 3 times over.
Oh, really?
At this point. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's like everywhere I've been going, just out and about, or I went to a wedding last weekend, and that was like the main topic of conversation I had with everyone. How how many people were actually listening to it and not blowing smoke up our ass, and just really like liking it and relating to it and coming up with their own stories of things, that were really similar to a lot of the guests that we had on. So it's really, really, really cool.
What I like about tonight's episode, Mike, is that you and I talked to.
Yeah.
Before the episode, your artistic work very much, at least to me, resonates with what we're doing. Like all three bands that we just mentioned, to me that's the very soundtrack of like riding a bicycle through a haunted American suburban town.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of, I kind of mentioned to you that was stuff's been going on since I was a kid, and Last Line had a bit more of like a horror movie kind of vibe to it than basing stuff on real life hauntings and paranormal stuff. And the Prowl was a step towards kind of talking about that kind of thing without being, kind of judged or called a quack or whatever. It's like a good artistic outlet for trying to make sense of all the weird shit that goes bump in the night.
But so you touched on a lot of these topics with the bands?
With the Prowl, I did, yeah, because I sang for that band and kind of had a lot of kind of creativity in there. So yeah, there's a few songs that touch on some of this stuff. Nothing like direct. It's
right.
It's not like the Shadow Dweller stuff where Aaron's kind of like telling his story. This is a little more kind of generalized.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So I guess we can jump right into the conversation. I know you messaged Klaus and you kind of gave a list of things, that have happened to you since you were a kid. And, whatever you want to start with, I guess we can just go from there if you have like a brief outline of these things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll kind of start from the beginning. It's kind of logical. Yeah, just grew up, mom, dad, kid brother, Catholic, not really having to go to church or anything like that, more kind of sending the kids off to CCD class. So, little Catholic weirdness in there. But
and this was in Western Massachusets?
Yeah, it was. So, yeah, so kind of the first thing that ever really went down was I was probably like 6-7 years old or so. And, at the time I was kind of like I was just like your average kid, and, I wasn't like an altar boy or anything like that. And, like all kids, you're kind of freaked out of the dark and all that kind of thing. And, so at the time, like we were sharing a room, my brother and I was kind of under the window of my bed. And, I remember one night just kind of waking up and looking towards the door, and I thought it was my mom. It's basically my folks' room was down the hall from our room. And we would sleep with the door open, and my mom would wear this like white bathrobe. So I woke up and I thought it was her coming in to check on us. And I remember being like, Mom. And I kind of like double take, and it was just kind of this white figure. Nothing like no serious detail in the face or anything like that, but it looked like a, adult size to like a kid. And I remember kind of freaking out and putting my head under the covers and doing the sign of the cross and saying Our Father, and took my head out from under there, and it was gone. Right. So kind of throughout like my childhood, never really talked about it too much. And as I was getting older, there was kind of, it wasn't like there's no other like apparitions or anything like that had happened in the house growing up, but there was always like strange, like, the basement even to this day is still kind of like an uncomfortable place there to kind of like get weird cold feelings, feel like somebody's watching you, kind of feel like you see things out of the corner of your eye kind of place. So just kind of growing up, not too much weird stuff happened. As I got a bit older and at the holidays, you hear the grown-ups talking. Come to find out, some other people in my family had this type of stuff happen. There's a story. My uncle was staying with a great aunt and uncle, and he was staying over studying for a Navy test. And goes to bed, and he hears big footsteps coming down the hall. Next thing he knows, the door's opening, and a little girl walks in the room. And from what he says, he felt like if the girl touched him or got very close to him, he'd die. So it was like this, just feeling a terror, and he was it almost sounds like sleep paralysis. He said he couldn't move.
Wow.
And he was trying to scream for my aunt, and eventually she came in, but apparently she had heard him like thrashing around, and it's like, came to check on him, and the girl was gone, and that was that. So I remember hearing that story as a kid and being like, oh, okay, like I'm not the only one that's seen something weird. Kind of brought it up, and it was just kind of poo-pooed and shooed away, like not that big a deal, don't think about it. And that was kind of like that in their house. But that kind of like, it was always in the back of my mind, and it was one of those things that always stuck with me. And as I got older and met more people and talked to more people, and you just hear about these hauntings and strange things and people having these experiences, and you kind of learn more and pay more attention to things, So that was kind of like my introduction to the paranormal in this world. Growing up was kind of average, riding bikes, doing BMX racing, and, get a little bit older and going to hardcore shows and that. And kind of the next real thing that had happened, it was pretty quiet up and through my teen years and all that stuff. The next thing that really happened was something to this day, like as far as like about a month ago, I've gotten another take on what happened. So this kind of part of the story is pretty weird.
Okay.
At the time I was living, this was about, from what I can gather, it was like 2002. And I was living with one of my buddy and his girlfriend at the time. It's this attic apartment here in Westfield. Small, like, it's in the attic, so it's all the walls are like angled, and it's real small, claustrophobic, and in kind of true punk house fashion. My room was a closet with a mattress on the floor, like behind the living room, like behind the TV, basically. And I'd always been like interested in, like ghosts and aliens and all that stuff. But, again, since I was a kid, I really hadn't had anything too weird happen. We try and freak ourselves out now and again, but, I had a suspicion there was something else to this world. So didn't really get into Ouija boards or anything like that. So we're living in this house and getting ready to go on tour. Basically, we had a holiday party. It was shortly after Christmas, and had all the friends over. Everybody was hanging out. As the night got on, like everybody was drinking and, kind of partying and stuff. And I was like, man, I got to put 7 inches together. I got to pack. I got to do all this stuff. Like I'm not partying. So I was just kind of doing my thing. One of my buddy's girlfriends is helping me stuff records. And, one by one, everybody starts crashing out or taking off or, passing out somewhere. And, before I know it, it's kind of just me and this girl stuffing record sleeves and kind of bullshitting. She ends up going to bed in the living room, which was like right outside my door. So it was like you'd be sitting on the couch, you're looking at the TV, and to the right of that TV is this little like inlet and the door to a closet. So my head would be like behind the TV, my feet were at the door. Kind of stay up, do a little bit of packing and all that. Like the van was coming to pick me up at like 5 or 6 in the morning. And, by this time it's probably already like 2 or so. It was getting late. So I lay down to bed and I'm just kind of laying in bed, just thinking like, all right, cool, man. We're going to go play some shows this week. This is going to be rad. It's going to be a good time. And kind of just starting to drift off to sleep. And actually there also in this room, basically the way my room was set up was just the mattress on the floor. My head's all the way at the back. There's like a little like kind of cubby behind my head from where the angles of the roof were. And then to my left was like a tiny window. It was like maybe like 8 to 12 inches across, just like a small little window. So there was always kind of some light coming in, and I'd leave the door open so that heat could get in there because it would get really cold in the winter if the door wasn't open. So the door's just open a crack, and I'm laying there, and kind of all of a sudden, this really, really tall guy who wasn't at the party ducks in under the door And he points at me, and he like beckons with his finger, like, come here. And he's just kind of there. And then I pass out, and I have like one of the most peaceful nights of sleep I've ever had in my life, like completely out. So this guy, this apparition that comes in the room, he, you know, given the size of the door, he must have been 7 feet tall or so. He's a giant guy, really tall, really skinny. He was wearing a white suit, like a white 3-piece suit. It wasn't like super, super old, like Victorian looking or like Civil War era looking or anything like that. Just looked like a average white suit with a black tie. And he had like a white hat on that was not quite like a fedora, but not really like a full like stovepipe like Abe Lincoln hat. And he had this like black kind of like Fu Manchu like kind of mustache with a little bit of goatee, and these black eyes, just like totally black, like complete blackness. And his skin was just this like white, like almost like translucent pasty tone to it. And long fingers, like all like the limbs were really long, like it almost seemed like they stretched a person out, you know, like just the proportions were strange.
It's so crazy to me that how descriptive you are with it, because you know most of the people so far we've had on that have seen any sort of apparition, you know, it's usually a very cloudy type of figure. They don't remember the type of clothing it was, more like shadowy, and like just your descriptions right now are really like on point. And it's kind of, you know, it's giving me the goosebumps as I look down at my arm, just trying to put myself in that situation. It's all right, you can carry on, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, it's burned into my mind. Like it is nothing I could ever begin to forget, you know. But yeah, it just kind of, you know, I remember him, like the way he looked in, like, did you guys see that movie It Follows?
I was just thinking that right before you said that.
Okay, so when the tall guy comes in the room, that is basically how he entered my room. Like when I saw that movie, my skin crawled.
It just must have brought it all back, right?
Yeah,
someone like so oversized crammed into this small area, kind of.
Yeah, almost like praying mantis, like the way that it was like all limbs, like just like these lanky limbs.
And so this was back in 2002.
Yeah, it was about 2002, 2003. I was trying to look for tour posters to get an exact date, but I couldn't find any. So yeah, like I said, I fell asleep, had like an awesome night of sleep, got up, went on tour, and didn't even think about it, didn't talk about it, didn't talk to any of the guys about it, just was totally out of mind. And like we were gone for about 2 weeks or so. When I get home and nobody's home, and as soon as we got home, it all kind of came back and hit me, and I was like, oh my God, I have to go to sleep in this place now. Holy shit. But that was it. That was it. It didn't come back.
Were you drifting off to sleep when that was happening? Do you remember?
I was getting there, you know, I was definitely tired. I was just kind of laying there, like thinking about, okay, yeah, we're going to go, you know, go have some fun with friends. It's kind of, you know, the last thoughts running through your head at the end of the day kind of thing.
I couldn't imagine just falling right asleep after seeing something like that, you know?
Yeah. It was that's the almost like, it's almost crazier than the apparition itself. That's what's so crazy to me about it was just this peaceful, like immediate slumber.
Yeah. But when what's going on, was there any fear in you or anything like that?
Complete terror. Just, like, I don't know if it was necessarily like paralysis, you know, but I was just kind of like stiff as a board, kind of staring at this thing. And it was like beckoning, like, come with me. That was like the feeling. And there's no way in hell I'm going anywhere with that thing. So what's strange about this is this has been kind of like, you know, I've told this story a million times over the years, you know, and I've always kind of told it this same way because it's how I remember it. And over the years, I talked to people about it, and people were like, man, that is the scariest fucking thing. Like, what the hell? I can't even imagine. Like, what's that about, you know? So in like 2009, I went down just like north of Atlanta. I went to a Lutheran school for building guitars and stuff. And the school, at the time, they were redoing their student housing. and they had us staying off campus with like a friend of the school, and it was some guy that was like on tour with a band. I don't know if he was in a band or doing like, you know, like roadie stuff or what. But he wasn't really there too often. Anytime he'd come back, he was like a super cool guy and would like chat and hang out, and then, you know, he'd be gone again. So it was like the end of school, and getting ready to leave like the next day, and we're all just kind of hanging out in the living room talking, and as it happens, it kind of turns to ghost stories, and we're all chatting and telling our tales, and this guy's telling me some of the craziest stuff I've ever heard, right? Like, I mean, he was his family came here from India, and they moved into this one house, and then, or this one apartment, and slowly more family came and moved in with them or other apartments in the building. And he was telling me about how, I mean, this is like some demonic stuff, like, you know, like cousins getting thrown out of bed and bitten in the night, that kind of thing, like seriously evil stuff. So I'm hearing it. I'm like, man, this story I have is going to suck compared to what this guy's telling us. It's like G-rated by comparison, you know? So he gets done telling his stuff, and I start telling mine. And the whole time I'd never had somebody react to it like this. The whole time he's kind of like smiling at me as I'm telling it, and like nodding his head. And he just has this like look like he's like psyched. I'm like, wow, like this is kind of weird. So I get done telling, and like, as soon as I finished telling what happened, he's like, Mike, you can't ever tell that as a scary story. You're blessed. Like that is in my religion, like we pray for that. You should have got up and went and prayed with him. Like, that is amazing. I can't believe that happened to you. So that kind of, that was the first thing I'd ever heard about. I looked in.
What made him come to that conclusion? The way the person was dressed, or the way they kind of beckoned you, like in a peaceful manner, or
both? Kind of the way he was dressed and the way he beckoned me.
Because usually a figure all in white is always something, you know, not demonic, you know, in like the good and evil black and white, you know, color scheme.
Sure.
I guess what people reference, you know, something maybe some sort of godly attributes to it or something like that.
Then again, Lucifer was the angel of light.
Right.
Indeed.
So we never know, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a bizarre reaction to a story like that.
Yeah, and so apparently where his family was from, they were, I don't know if it was like Hinduism mixed in with Islam or vice versa. So they kind of believed in kind of a spectrum of both of those religions. And what he was saying was that it was a jinn.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's from Islam, right? A jinn. Is a jinn a demon in Islam?
Apparently, it's like in between a person. Yeah, I'm not positive about that. I don't want to speak, you know, be misquoted on that. But I believe it's like just like a third. Like, I think they exist in our dimension, but like out of sight, kind of thing. But the way he described it was almost like it was a guardian angel type thing.
Really?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
That made me feel way better about it. And I'm thinking, I'm like graduating this school that like I'm doing something for the first time I'm really stoked on. So it's like, yeah, maybe, wow, this is like maybe this is like closure to this story. This is like pretty neat. And yeah, definitely anybody I talked to about it had no idea what this thing was over the years until this guy.
And so nothing else ever really happened in that house to anyone else that you know of?
Well, we'll get there.
Oh, all right.
For sure. Yeah, that guy told me some stuff. I looked into jinns and that, and it kind of seemed like a guardian angel, but at the same time, some stuff I read said that it could be like a mischievous, like a deceiver that like it's like a spirit that doesn't necessarily want to hurt you, but it might steer you in the wrong direction or something. Right. Seems to be a lot of stuff out there about it, but yeah, so, you know, got back from school. At that point, I wasn't, you know, this was like 7-8 years later after I had seen it. So I wasn't living at that house anymore. I was working at a health insurance company after I got out of school, before I got going with the guitar repair stuff. And I was talking to a girl I worked with, you know, we're telling ghost stories. Same thing, you know. and she was a Puerto Rican girl, and she told me, I tell the story, she goes, "Oh, in my culture, that's the devil." I'm like, "Oh shit."
Now you're getting another completely different perspective to scare the hell out of you.
Right. Right. So, you know, it had been a long time since anybody had told me anything about it. And then I got out of school after hearing this cool stuff about it, and maybe, you know, a year, not even a full year later, this girl's telling me, "Oh no, that's bad. That's like really bad. Like you don't want to see that." Which was kind of a trip. I thought I'd had this thing wrapped up.
Oh yeah, a complete 180, right?
Right. So over the years, still kind of, you know, tell people the story every now and again. And, you know, at one point, this one guy that I had lived with, he knew a guy that did a lot of like paranormal investigation stuff and that. And he was saying, "Oh, I'll ask my friend about it." And this guy says, "Oh, it's like a benign apparition dating back to like 3rd Dynasty China. No big deal. Nothing demonic, nothing crazy. It's pretty common." So there's another like layer to the onion.
Mm-hmm.
Keeps going, you know, eventually talk to a few more people, and everybody kind of has a different idea on it, you know. Never really got too far with it. Never hadn't really seen it again. At that time, the house I was living in, I had my next kind of like experience, which I never had sleep paralysis before. You know, I'd had insomnia for years, but I never had any sleep paralysis type stuff. So this house I was living in had a mattress on the floor. It's like those big old radiators, you know, they get real hot in the winter. So I wouldn't have my bed too close to that in the winter, but during the summer, I'd push my bed right up against it to have more space in the room. And so between like my bed and the window that was next to it, there was maybe 1.5 feet of space. This one night, wake up in the middle of the night and, you know, kind of textbook sleep paralysis thing. Can't move. And in that little space to the left of my bed where there's like the 1.5 feet or so, there's this like black, like detailless, like black, like blacker than black, like leaning over me. And it was just dread. It was like total terror. You know, I mean, it could have been, you know, it could have lasted 20 seconds. It could have lasted 10 minutes. You know, I really don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It was that like terrifying, discombobulating. And it was just this figure like leaning over towards me. And eventually I basically screamed myself awake to the point that my roommate came in my room thinking something was wrong. So that, as I've learned more about that, I don't know if this is a dot to connect to it or not, but that's the only time I've ever had any kind of sleep paralysis.
Mm-hmm. So that figure you saw, was that more like straight on with you, or is that in your peripheral vision?
It was to the left of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was as if like if you're in bed and like somebody's leaning over your bed, like tucking you in or something, or, you know, your girl's like, you know, leaning over to give you a kiss or something. It was kind of like that, like perspective of it, you know, like I was just looking out of my eyes, which was all I could move. And it's just this thing kind of peering down on me. And it was really long and elongated, but it kind of had like a, you know, a defined head and then body, but not necessarily limbs.
Mm-hmm. It's like one of the most frightening like experiences, you know, something like that so close and not knowing what it is, and then on top of it not being able to move or get words out, and it takes almost forever to get out of that moment. And it's those are some of the scariest things I've ever had to me, you know, being in that state with feeling some sort of presence there with you, and not being able to escape it.
Right. Yeah, it was pure terror. I mean, you know, that was the figure in the doorway. That was the first thing I had seen since I was a kid, right?
Right.
This sleep paralysis experience, that was like the first thing I saw after that. But throughout my life, like I always kind of had like feelings about things. You know, if I went in, you know, sometimes I'd go in somebody's house and it would just feel like, you know, cold and like just something wasn't right there, you know, or sometimes you meet somebody and you get this just gut feeling like something's off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it was always very kind of like sensitive to things, but nothing, you know, as crazy as the guy in the doorway had happened. And, you know, before that happened, nothing as crazy as the apparition I saw in the doorway in my childhood bedroom had happened, right? So after the sleep paralysis incident, just kind of a couple more quiet years, not a heck of a lot, you know, weird feelings about stuff, but nothing, you know, nothing too crazy. But, you know, I was getting older and, you know, talking to my folks and stuff about things. I start just kind of learning some more about, you know, stuff that my mom had experienced and people in the family. And it kind of seems like some of this stuff had gone back, like almost like generations. Like apparently my great grandfather, they came from Italy, and he would do that like Italian folk magic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, somebody would think they got the evil eye put on them, and they'd go see my great grandfather, and he would, I guess, like put oil and water and put like forks or something over it and do some ceremony and lift it.
That's really cool.
My grandmother had seen like after her mother had passed, my great grandfather was sick at one point. And my grandmother had woken up from a nap, and her mother was in the room with her. She's like, "Oh, it's okay. It's not time yet. It's not ready yet." And then great grandfather ended up living for a few more years. Apparently, her sister had woken up at one point in the morning or in the middle of the night, and she said she saw like skull and crossbones like floating in front of her. And then within like a month, like one of their brothers had died. And also the thing I kind of started off with my uncle. So there's, you know, some type of, and who knows if it's, you know, great grandfather playing around with that crazy Italian witchcraft and it kind of opened up people or what. But, you know, the more I kind of start learning about things, you know, so at that point in my life, I didn't know that my mother had had a miscarriage before me. So as I'm older and we're talking about this kind of creepy stuff, she's telling me, yeah, when you guys were kids, like leaving the house, I would always feel like somebody was watching me out your bedroom window. She would say at times she'd be like, she'd look out the kitchen window, and the neighbor's cat would be staring out their window at my bedroom window. More recently, over the past, like, I don't know, 5-10 years since the house has been quiet with, you know, just her and my pops there, she says that, you know, she'll be having coffee in the morning. She gets up, you know, 5-6 in the morning, has coffee and hangs out in the kitchen. And it sounds like somebody's walking. My old bedroom is above the kitchen. She says it sounds like somebody's walking from the doorway to the window.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens. Apparently it happens frequently. I've never heard that, but.
So kind of this stuff where your mom started happening later on in life with her as well?
No, she had like had these feelings and stuff since we were kids, but you know, when I was younger and I'd bring up, oh yeah, I saw this ghost in the doorway, it was just kind of brushed off.
Yeah.
But as I got older and we would talk about things, she kind of opened up to me more about that stuff. So clearly there's some kind of like haunting going on in that house. That neighborhood in general, there's like all kinds of weird stuff that has happened. So Westfield's a very old town. It was first settled in like 1639, 1640, somewhere around there. Then was actually like formed as a town in like 1670, something like that. Civil War town. George Washington stayed there at one point. Kind of a local claim to fame. So like our neighborhood, you know, there's a lot of that around. So who knows if it's, you know, the site of some kind of battles or something even older than that.
Yeah, a lot of history and a lot of dramatic history.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, just in like the radius of a few blocks from my folks' house, I mean, at the end of the street, I've heard stories from a friend about, you know, full body apparition in their room. At the end of my parents' street, maybe about 10 years ago at this point, this guy strangled his girlfriend to death. They didn't find her in the house for a few days. When the state police went to investigate, they said that they heard violent screaming coming from within the house. Searched the house, didn't find anything. Searched the premises, didn't find anything, and ended up just leaving eventually. Further down that street, this guy that I worked with at a point in my 20s, we got talking about this stuff and footsteps, doors slamming, white misty things, orbs, that kind of stuff in his house. Block over from there, this one house some friends lived in, lots of stuff, like a guy playing a guitar. We're all hanging out. This guy's playing a guitar, and like every time he would play this riff, there'd be like knocking in the kitchen, but nobody's in there. Nobody was home. Another friend woke up one night and the room was like filled with like children. Wow. He like closed his eyes, put his head under the covers, whatever, and they were closer when he like looked again.
That's nightmare fuel.
Right. Right. Okay. So one thing I forgot to add. So this kind of ties in. It steered me back there. So what I'm getting at is Westfield has a lot of kind of, you talk to people and there's a lot of people that have had these strange experiences. So at one point in town, this guy, he killed his family and then blew his brains out on the steps of City Hall, or in the front yard of City Hall, late one night. And you never really heard too much about it after that. Right around that time too, like just north up into the hills, this town Blanford, this guy killed his wife and then, ran off into the woods, and they found him like hung and like half eaten by coyotes. The house I was living in, where I saw the guy come into the room, my buddy's girlfriend that we lived with, she was big on estate sales. She brought home the couch that the woman was killed on up in Blanford, not knowing that that was going on. And then she brought home some like tchotchkes and like little signs from the house where the guy had killed his family. So that almost makes me think about what if there was any kind of like stuff brought into the house from these places where these terrible things had happened.
Very well could have. A lot of residual kind of maybe bad energy came with those things.
Right.
New England is like always been a hotbed of activity and supernatural occurrences. I mean, it feel like it's just endless. The stories that just keep pouring out, all just the little things that just keep adding up. This area is like there's just so much to it.
Yeah, it almost seems the older I get, it'll be quiet for stretches, but then I learn more from people,
right?
Stories and stuff. So yeah, just that area I grew up in was, it's weird. Like who knows what's going on in that neck of the woods. I did actually today when I was at work, I did a little search around on Google to see if I could find any info on, any battles during the Revolutionary War or Civil War or anything like that might have been in the neighborhood, but nothing popped up. There was a lot to look through, but nothing jumped out, anything significant. So who knows? It could be something far older than that. But yeah, kind of like getting beyond that, it'd been, after that, been kind of a while. See, I'm looking at my notes here. I kind of have a little bit of a timeline. Oh, one thing I missed that I didn't see. So when something did happen when I was like 10, 11 at a out-of-body experience. There was this like not swimming hole, it was like a waterfall. There's like this big concrete like ledge thing next to it. And when we were kids, we'd like, jump off it, swim around. And there was like, you'd go up this like ramp, kind of concrete ramp. At the top of it was another piece. So, every kids always daring each other to jump off the higher thing. I was up on the very top, which was like where all the older kids would jump off of. It was this like handrail, probably from the rail to the water was probably a solid like 20 feet or so. And stand up there and this kid's like, "Come on, pussy, just go," and pushed me off it. And I like distinctly remember watching myself fall from above. Like I was like almost like a shot from a movie where you're like, looking down at the action, like watching myself fall. We went in the water and, hit my head on the bottom. Buddy jumped in, kind of dragged me out, and that was that. But that was something that had happened between being like a little kid and seeing this thing.
And that happened like middle of the day while you were conscious.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was like, after school, summertime after school. I remember because, I was young enough that, I would have to check in or, still go places with my folks. So it must have been like 10, 11.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember I had to be home to go somewhere with them. And it was like, I got home and I was like, I had a chipped tooth and I was like bleeding all over the place.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me find my place on here again. So, all right. So we had at one point gone to the group of friends and I, the Warrens.
Right.
They would do their like events where you could go down to their house and, they take you through the museum and show you Annabelle and all that stuff.
Did you do one of those trips?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
My whole life, they're only 30 minutes from me. So I don't Rant would always do. It was like was it like a dinner event you went to, and then you would tour their museum and maybe bring you to a couple of the cemeteries in their area. And always wanted to go. And every year it still comes up because Lorraine still does it since he's passed, and always just kind of sleep on it, and they sell out super quick and never got the opportunity to do it, and always wanted to. So I'm really into listening to a story about that if you have it.
Yeah. It was amazing. It was, there were, through my teenage years and stuff, like kind of learning more about this, you discover the Warrens and their work and all that. So you read all the case studies and all the stuff they did and get your mind blown out.
Class, are you familiar with the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine Warren?
No.
They're like the ultimate ghost hunters. They were on the Amityville horror case. A lot of cases they worked on were turned into movies, like The Haunting in Connecticut, The Conjuring.
They were the ones that made investigations.
Yeah, and they were a married couple. They were, deeply religious Christians. I think they were Catholics.
Yep.
And they were at the forefront, of all these studies from the 60s onward. And, they very popular. They toured around the world with their shows. They, especially around in our area, they were either always at colleges or high schools around Halloween time. And then they would also have these personal dinners that they would do where you would pay a certain amount of money, go to a place in their area for dinners. They do a ghost presentation, then they'd bring you to all these haunted areas. They had a museum in their house of all haunted artifacts, including like the famous Raggedy Ann doll, which the movie Annabelle was based on, and a ton of other things, and they are. This
is the couple that they're making movies about till this day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of the cases they worked on. Yep. Sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to kind of preface that for class and whoever else was familiar with them.
Now I'm with you.
Yeah.
And now I know who you're talking about. But they basically dedicated their lives to this.
Oh yeah.
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 And she's a clairvoyant. And he was, he called himself a demonologist, Ed. And carry on, sorry.
Yeah, no. And I mean, Ed also was like one of, I think at the time, like something like one or two like non-ordained Catholic priests that had like, they were able to administer exorcisms and stuff, like pretty heavy couple. A group of friends, we went to one of these. It was after Ed had passed. So I want to say it was like maybe 2015, 16, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was only a few years ago. Then we went down to check it out, and it was great. Like, they take you into the house, and, you sit in the living room, and, they show, this, she's getting on there in age, and she wasn't feeling well when we went. So she wasn't out at first. And one of the guys that run New England Paranormal Society showed us like a film of like an exorcism they did and spoke to us for a while. Then Lorraine came out and she talked to us. And then after that, we went through like a tour of their museum of all their stuff, which was kind of a trip. Like, haven't had experiences over the years. I was like, I didn't want to look at anything or touch anything. Like, my buddy was like, hey, take a picture of me next to Annabelle. I'm like, nope, absolutely not. Like, it was creepy, you know. It
Were
was
there
heavy in
warning
there.
signs on some of the items in the museum?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like do not touch, like do not stare at this, and of course people are like poking at shit and
Yeah.
like aghast, like no, don't do it. So we go through we go through the museum. It's cool. After the museum, they bring us to the cemetery where Ed is buried.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember which cemetery it is, but there's some famous ghost. That's
Union Cemetery. It would
yeah,
either be Union or Stepney Cemetery, and they're both a couple miles from each other. And the white lady is the actual ghost. Was that the one?
yeah. I'm pretty sure that's it.
And she would travel on that road in between both cemeteries. There's books written about that, and that was like supposedly the first time a ghost was actually caught on film, and they would only show that film at their shows, you know, but they would never release the actual footage of it outside of showing it during one of their shows.
Wow. Yeah, they took us there and showed us around, and they kind of take like 20 pictures of this one thing without moving and see if anything pops up. Kind of teaching you about psychic photography and all that stuff. And after that, they brought us to a dinner, just like a banquet type place, and at that point you could ask questions, and they did more personal talking with you, and you could have Lorraine sign a book, like that kind of thing. So as the night went on, like the group of friends I went with, like my friend Josh had like, he grew up in a haunted house like I did in Westfield. Like he has some pretty crazy stories of, apparitions and all kinds of weird stuff. But what, he had this like video camera where him and his friend were at her like aunt's house watching it, and they thought they were getting messed with by friends, and it wasn't. Like they were like the how, stuff was slamming, and the phone kept ringing and it was crackly, and he got like audio of this voice on the other end of the phone that was like this, it's like this like weird like demon voice thing. So he brought that to show them, and I wanted to talk to them about this stuff to see if, I feel like the more I learn about this, the more I don't know about it,
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of like hung out late night. We were some of the last people there, and I talked to the main investigator guy from down there, and I'm telling him about, basically telling the same story I just told you guys. And he's like, doesn't sound demonic. Doesn't seem like it's anything evil, it might be scary, but it's nothing to worry about, blah, blah, blah. We go out to the car, and, they play him the audio of the phone call and stuff. And they're all kind of like, wow, what the heck is that? So that was it. We kind of like end for the night, kind of having some questions answered and kind of more questions because of it. But through talking to this guy, he's like, well, it sounds like, you have some type of sensitivity to things, if this kind of thing keeps happening to you, you have these feelings, you have seen stuff, it's going to continue for the rest of your life. So just know that. And, just, it's going to happen. Nothing you can do is going to change that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of I don't know if necessarily a comforting thing, but it definitely kind of put things in perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
So the group of friends that I went with, I was like traveling around, like I was working as a guitar tech out on tour for years. And there's guys that I worked with that, we all went down to the thing. So, we'd be on tour checking stuff out, and, oh yeah, there's a weird graveyard, we're in Germany. Let's go check out this weird graveyard, just always looking around. And, so, like-minded people situation. So one night with these guys, we were sitting on the tour bus. It was like after a gig, like we were in the middle of nowhere, like absolutely, like there's, bus, like when you're on like the tour bus, like you'll have bus call at like 3 a.m. or whatever time they got to get the driver up. So we had a late bus call, but there was like nowhere to go around the club, and there was nobody hanging out. So we were just on the bus having like a mellow night. There's guys in the front lounge, like drinking wine and chilling out. And in the back lounge, so like you go through like the bunk alley, and there's a back lounge. And we all went back there because the Exorcist was on. So we're like, cool, watch the Exorcist, chill out. Now on the bus, So if you're in the back lounge where we were looking at the TV, you look forward down the bunk alley, and in the front is the front lounge where there's like a little kitchenette and like, benches and stuff that guys are hanging out on. And we had all the doors open because everybody was so mellow. Now you get to the end of bunk alley into the front lounge, and on the left there's like a kitchenette. On the right there's a bathroom, and then you get a little bit past that, and that's where everybody's hanging. On the kitchenette, you have like a little sink and cupboards and stuff, and we had all the bottles of booze and wine and soda and mixers and stuff, and all the bottles of wine were like behind the bottles of booze and like also underneath the cupboards. So like if you wanted one of those, you really had to reach in and move stuff and get it. So we're doing the movie, sitting in the back. One of the guys gets up to use the bathroom. He's in the bathroom, and I'm sitting in the middle in the back lounge. So I'm looking straight down bunk alley into the front of the bus, and a bottle of wine just flies from out behind where it was and smashes on the bathroom door.
Wow.
While The Exorcist is playing.
While The Exorcist is playing, and while there's guys like sitting in the front just like relaxing. Now, I believe the guy that was in the bathroom said that it sounded like somebody was jiggling the door handle before that happened. So that was kind of weird too. And then another one of the guys just kind of got up and said, that's my demon. And this guy has some pretty wild stories himself. I don't want to name names, but later on I could let you know. It might be somebody you'd want to talk to.
Oh, very good.
No,
when
go
he
ahead.
said that's my demon, was it something that he thought maybe followed him around wherever he went?
Yeah, it could have been something like that.
Yeah.
Every now and again, like he'd smudge the bus or, he was definitely like kind of part of the crew of dudes that would go check out like horror movies and the weirder stuff and talk about weird stuff late at night. So that was a pretty strange thing, but that was, a couple of guys that we went to the Warrens event with, we were there hanging out. So after that, let's see here, where are we at? All right. Yeah. So after that, like, the next thing that happened, this kind of ties into Cam's podcast with you guys, which gave me fucking chills when I heard this.
It's great.
His story at the end when he's talking about his UFO experience. I've had so much weird shit with like ghosts and stuff. I had totally forgotten about this until I heard that. And like I was in the shower listening to the podcast, and I was like, it felt like somebody walked over my grave. I was like, what the fuck?
That's what we want.
Yeah, man. And that was, kind of why I wanted to reach out. It was like, holy shit. Maybe who knows? Maybe somebody listening has seen this mysterious figure in the doorway and has a story too,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, it was, we were having band practice up at my buddy's house. He lived like, he had a big field in the back. So this is probably like 2014, 15 in there, that same kind of time period.
And where was this geographically?
This was in East Hampton, Mass, which is north of Westfield a bit. And I was living in Holyoke at the time, which was over the mountain from him. So we're hanging out after jamming, we're hanging out in the backyard, and it's just like a nice night, totally clear sky, and we're just looking at the sky, and we were actually talking about we had all seen like a lot of fireballs and like meteors and comets and stuff that year. So we're just kind of chatting about that, and my friend was mentioning how you can see the space station fly by. So we're just kind of all paying attention to the sky, like, whatever, solid night. I'm heading home, and I'm going over the mountain, and I'm coming down the mountain, and I notice like to my right, which would have been, I believe, south, this kind of like orange, like bright orange glow, like up in the sky. But there's still kind of like trees and stuff, so I couldn't really tell what it was. And I get down this like winding like road down the mountain to cut through to it, and I'm keeping my eyes on it, and I can see it. And I decide, I go down the road towards it, and as I'm going down the road, like it looks like it's moving, right? But at this time, it's still just kind of a glow that I'm seeing. But you could kind of almost like a shadow, like something was in there. Now there's a military base, but that would have been kind of in the other direction, and like a lot of like the C-130s and the big like cargo planes go into this Air Force base, but they fly in from a completely different direction where this thing was, which kind of like that was the first thing I thought, oh, maybe it's an airplane or something like that, you know, one of these big nighttime planes. So I'm driving and the trees are kind of obscuring like where that area is. I was like, I want to get down and see if I can see it. And eventually I get down to this intersection, and I mean, it just opened up like the sky. It was like this orange glow up in the sky. And it looked like there was like within like the glow, it looked like there was like a city in the sky to me. And I mean, like when I heard Cam's description of it, it was like these structures that, you know, the way he described it, like it hit me because I had never heard of a UFO like sighting type thing like that. And I've never heard it described that way. And it just really took me aback hearing him describe it, to the point that like I talked to a few people, like an ex-girlfriend, some other people, and were like, hey, remember that UFO story I had? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, listen to this podcast and tell me what you think.
Do you remember what time of year it was?
Yeah, it was like springtime.
Okay. So I remember Cam's was in November. I'm wondering if you guys were seeing the same thing at the same time.
I was just thinking about the same thing.
Well, so this would have been because Cam's was, what did he say? It was like 2009, 2010, something like that.
Yeah, I think there was a couple sightings, and they were a year or two apart, but always around the same date in the month of November, they were really closely related at that time. I just don't remember the year exactly.
Yeah, I remember looking up the video that he had mentioned. And so
the last one that he told us about had happened prior to the other one that he told on the story. Because when those lights were basically traveling along their car, that was when the band was going, the band that he's in right now, the Stance. And the other story that he told at the end of the episode, that had happened a couple of years earlier.
Okay.
I'm 99% sure about that.
Yeah, I feel like I mean, so this was like 2014 or 2015 from what I can gather. Maybe even 2016, but yeah, it was like early spring because the trees weren't like full bloom, like they were just kind of like budding still. So yeah, it's kind of hearing that, it just really freaked me out. Like that's the, you know, UFO stuff is something I always thought was cool, but I was like, I don't know if that's something I'll ever like see or have an experience with. And I remember seeing that and it like blew my mind, you know. And that's what's so weird. It just looked like this like black, like almost like video game background, like city, like up in this orange cloud that was like kind of backlighting it and front lighting it. Like it was almost like the tone, like the like orange of like one of those salt lamp things.
Yeah, unreal, man. Makes you feel very small when you see something like that. You know, not physically, but just like this otherworldly type of vehicle.
Yeah, it was like peering into another dimension.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that's kind of its own thing. That doesn't pertain to any of the ghostly stuff, clearly. But who knows, you know, if it's, you know, just paying attention to stuff, being receptive to stuff, just kind of looking around more and looking for things. I don't know.
Also, how we react to it, I believe that has to do with it comes down to things on a personal level, because the ghostly things, I mean, that's a personal interaction, whereas seeing lights, etc., or figures in the sky, that's more like an encounter for all of us, you know, like planet Earth having visitors. Or whatever we make out of it. So it's like psychologically it's different. Yeah. And you know, it's funny you mentioned that, because I had mentioned there was a lot of fireballs that we were all seeing that year.
it was kind of like, I'd be sitting on the back porch after work or whatever, chilling out, and you'd see him up over the mountain. It got to the point that I started, there was a website that you can report like meteors and fireballs and all that kind of stuff. And then you can kind of track it through other reports. So that year I had been, every time I saw these fireballs, I'd go see if anybody else did, and I'd enter in what I saw, and never really thought anything about it. And that night I went and, for the next couple of days, I checked to see if anybody reported something, and there was nothing on those websites.
It always feels good when someone else is having that same experience. So, it's not just you that's having an illusion, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, this one, the feeling from this to like the more like supernatural stuff was in a way I was like, I knew it. I knew there was fucking aliens. Like, of course, it was almost more like relief than like terror.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of after that, so maybe must've been like, so I moved into a house, not this past February, but the February before. And if anywhere I've ever lived should be haunted as shit, it's this place. I'm up on a mountain in the woods on the Western Mass Connecticut line, this town called Southwick. It's this old brick farmhouse from like the mid 1800s that my buddy and his family and I were kind of the caretakers of the place.
Cool.
And I mean, this place is old as shit. Like the basement is like, looks like something out of a horror film,
It's like an old dirt. Is it a dirt basement in the house?
It's not a dirt basement, but it's like low, and it's like all these like weird little like angles and chambers and stuff, and
crawl spaces.
Yeah. It's like, it almost looked like they might have kept like baby chickens in there at one point. There's this like little pen chicken wired off, because it's like it's a farm. It's like on a big piece of like just property in the woods. So this place, like moving in, it was kind of like, man, all right, well, we got to move here. So whatever. But no weird vibes, no like cold feelings. No, it was the first place it's like, I just kind of expect places to be haunted at this point, this place just the calmest feeling place I've ever lived in, really, which is nice. But so we're moving in February, and I mean, it's just dead silent in February. All the animals are sleeping or gone. Snow on the ground, so that pads any like street noise or anything. And I was home alone, and moving into any new place is kind of strange, anyways. And my buddy, one of the guys I went to the Warrens thing with, was like, "Hey, I got an episode of Coast to Coast I'm going to send you. You need to listen to this right now. This lady's talking about the guy that came into your room."
Same description?
Yeah.
Oh.
Wow.
So I'm like, oh shit. Yeah. All right. So, and I had not been aware of this like phenomena or anything at all until I heard this. And oh my God, this woman talking about it like made my skin crawl. So she was calling it Hat Man. Have you guys ever heard of Hat Man?
Yeah. And I think Hat Man has become, in later years, like the pop cultural name for it, but it comes out of what used to be referred to as shadow people, right?
Right.
I think.
Right. Yeah, they're apparently intertwined somehow. I don't know if Shadow or Hat Man is a shadow person or if he lives in their realm or what. But this woman had written a book on it, and she was talking about it, and her description was a little bit different than what I saw. It was more of the shadow people kind of description of these spirits or creatures or whatever they are. It was more of a dark silhouette type figure than something incredibly detailed like what I saw.
But like a male figure wearing old style clothes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a hat.
Yeah.
That's what got me, the hat.
That's crazy.
And yeah, I'll see if I can dig the episode up. I could send it off to you guys to check out. It's pretty creepy. I'll find the woman's book out at least. But yeah, she talks about it, how, it's like this malevolent being, and it's tied in with the shadow people. And if it comes around, you have to like mock it and make fun of it to make it go away, or else it almost sounds like possession, where it becomes more malevolent, and the more you feed into it, the more it kind of fucks with you.
Right.
So that scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Terrified. Like, great new house, fucking Hat Man. Oh no, I'm thinking about it. Now he's gonna come back.
Her description seemed the same, like the height wise and any other features that were
well, it was
common with yours.
Yeah, well, the height definitely, and like the hat and the dress, but it wasn't as. It was more. She was like describing the clothes, but it sounded more like a blacked out, almost like kind of typical shadow person description.
Yeah.
Not like
you said your guy had like a Fu Manchu style mustache and everything, and
yeah, and I mean, he was like in the room with me, like a person would have been. It wasn't like the thing I saw as a kid. Like, it looked kind of like a cotton ball you could put your hand through,
Right.
This was like a dude, like a real, like 3D real guy. So her description wasn't quite like that. So I don't know if it's necessarily the same thing.
But it sounds to be in that realm, definitely.
Indeed. So, since finding that out, I've done a little poking around and just reading and looking for things. And, the more I look into it, you hear people that have had sightings like that. They talk about shadow people and like the black-eyed kids, and which that fucking terrifies me. I hope I never have to deal with those little shits. It kind of gets in, but it seems like it's that same world of, I don't know if it's kind of, interdimensional beings or what. But having that kind of knowing about it was the more chatting with people, might be
right.
Connect dots. So kind of past.
Makes me think about Pete's stories, and the first episode ever that we did, and Pete talking about almost like, I'm not trying to freak you out now, Peter, but children crawling up into bed, or like having someone whisper in your ears almost, and it's just as real as like us sitting here right now. It gives me the chills even thinking about it.
Yeah, it's not a good feeling. ever. It's just always mind-blowing to me, and I've said it before, I think, on just about any episode that touched on this, how there's so many common and so many similarities with these stories from people, and how could it be so common that everyone that describes these things, they share so many of the same properties from hundreds of years ago to current times, from all over the world, from every culture, how could that be? That is what's like mind-blowing to me. I wish we could get some answers on things like that.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of seems like the more it's not like stigmatized like it was in the past, and the more people can kind of, like there's a forum right here, punk and hardcore and skinhead dudes talking about weird shit that's happened to them. That's another layer of people just getting their stories out and talking about it and kind of sharing, like who'd have thunk when I saw this UFO, did I think like, a few years later, I'd hear some kid from the other end of the state talking about seeing basically the same thing.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me.
It truly is.
So kind of like moving beyond that, last year in the late summer, I stopped touring and I decided to start my own business. And it's in this plaza that's like, it's an older plaza, like back in like the 90s, there was a skate park there that did like a lot of hardcore shows and stuff. So it's kind of funny. It's like this plaza's been like, in my life as long as I can remember. Like the store that I moved into was like a children's shoe store that I got shoes at when I was like a kid. So it's just kind of like whatever weird like town coincidence stuff.
What was that skate park? That was like off the Ingleside exit, right?
Yeah.
What we're talking about?
Yeah. Mass Skate Company.
Mass Skate. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually on the flagpole directly in front of my store is a Bloodshot Hooligan sticker.
Oh, no kidding.
Which had to have been hung up in like 1999 or something.
Yeah. I had played a few shows there over the years with Forced Reality and 100 Demons.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I had a lot of good times there. I'll tell you that.
Indeed. So yeah, like, I moved into this place, and the store I moved into was shot. It was just, this woman had ran it since the early 80s and hadn't given a shit in probably 10 years. And the night that I got the keys to the place, I ripped the carpeting out and all that. So I spent like a month renovating it, and a lot of long nights, a lot of sleeping there. And even now, 7 months on or so, I'm still sleeping there now and again. Like one night, it was a late night. So they're working, probably got done about like 2 a.m. or so. Figured, why drive a half hour home, have to come back in like 4 hours, I'll just crash on the air mattress. So I crashed in my office, and I had closed everything up, and woke up at 6 a.m. or like 5, like somewhere between 5 and 6 a.m. to the back door chime going off. And like when it goes off in my office, it's like, back door. It's like this woman's voice.
Mm-hmm.
So I wake up to that, and I was like, oh shit. So instantly run to the door, but the door is like dead closed. So I'm like, that's kind of strange. Throw the door open, and there's, nothing out back. It's just complete blackness. Like, so I just stand there for, a minute or two, no footsteps, no nothing. Close that up, go back out through the front of the store and check out the front, look out the window, nothing around. And I was like, maybe it was a wind, maybe whatever. Go back to sleep for a little bit and get up and do my day. Like maybe like, a month or so after that, I get chatting with the maintenance guy, who's probably like my age. He's a cool dude. And he gets telling me about some stuff. We kind of get talking more towards kind of like some weird stuff. And I was like, hey, what about this plaza? You ever get weird vibes up here? I was like, I haven't really, nothing seems off to me about it. And he's telling me about how at one point there was, I don't know which business it was in or whatever, but years ago, some guy was like living in the back of one of them. And I don't think he died back there, but he was having a hard time, and it was kind of a strange situation. But he's like, yeah, I always kind of get like a weird vibe, like when I go in that part. So we're kind of talking more and more about, this type of thing. And he starts telling me, he's like, yeah, man, you might think I'm crazy, but man, I moved into this house once. And he starts telling me this like banshee thing about like waking up in the middle of the night to, like an apparition of a woman, like in the corner screaming. I'm like, man, if this guy's talking about this stuff, then I can tell him about my shit. He's not going to think I'm crazy. So I started telling him about, this apparition in my doorway. He lived on that same street that I lived on.
Oh, when you were kids?
No, not when I was kids. When I was in my early 20s, where I saw the Hat Man.
Oh yeah.
So he had lived on that same street, and he had seen shadow people, and he had seen Hat Man. I start describing it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Hat Man and the shadow people. Yep, a lot of weirdness on that street."
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
No.
Oh.
And he had lived on a couple streets right around that area too. And apparently there was a guy that lived down the end of one of these streets in that neighborhood that was either like a voodoo or a Santeria practitioner that had all kinds of weird stuff. But this guy's experiences was, he would be like walking down the street during the day, and he would see Hat Man and shadow people, he was telling me.
Wow.
And he was saying he lived up in like a third floor, kind of the same thing. He's like, yeah, I'd see him now and again in the house. I'd see him during the day. I'd see him on the street. He's like, I feel like sometimes I go by that neighborhood and I still see it. He's like, there's something off about that neighborhood. He was telling me about when he had first moved in, he was talking to a neighbor or something, like an old Italian couple. And the guy was saying, oh, have you seen them yet? Have you seen the shadows yet?
Wow.
Yeah. And he was telling me about some deaths that had happened in the neighborhood. And just kind of other strangeness.
I mean, don't you think it's like really just, there's something about it where, you're having all these experiences through your life, and they're always, then you're getting interconnected with all these people now who are coming out and sharing almost the same types of things that you've seen. There's got to be some sort of like attraction, where it's just bringing, you're like a catalyst to people that are coming together, describing these same things to you. I mean, because you started at such a young age, but once this Hatman apparition started, you've had so many occurrences with people where they have these similarities over the years, and it's still happening to you now. It's got to be something there.
Yeah, it's really strange, and it's funny because it's this ongoing thing that
you can't escape it.
Yeah, yeah. It's who knows? I get off with you guys tonight, and I go to bed, and wake up to Hatman saying, "Stop fucking talking about me."
Yeah, yeah.
It's strange. Oddly enough, like the past couple weeks, there's been a lot of kind of heavy things happening around here with the family and some people, and been waking up on the dime every night at 3:00 in the morning. And ever since I was a kid, if I wake up like 2:45 or any time after 3, I'm not going to bed until 4:00. Like I'm up through the witching hour.
Yeah, same here.
Can't close my eyes. So like Monday, like this is, and this might, I don't know what this is, but like Monday, I was like doing some recording at the house on my day off, and went out. Like I said, I've been waking up past couple weeks, 3 a.m. like clockwork. And this house has always felt safe and like not dark, not cold, not strange. As I stand out in the driveway having some coffee and watching the birds, chilling out, and my housemates were all gone at work for the day. And it sounded like somebody was running around in their living room in their part of the house. Like footsteps, like to the point when I went back in the house, I was like, hello? Yo, anybody home? Like I wasn't sure if maybe while I was like recording loud guitars, like a sitter came home with the kid or something.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody home. The cats aren't making noise like that. Who knows? Could have been just something falling over, but that kind of...
Or it could be the beginning of something new for you in this house that previously felt safe.
Exactly. Exactly.
Not that it's unsafe now, but
yeah,
something could be stirring.
Over the years, I've gotten pretty good with like smudging and
Mm-hmm.
doing that kind of thing. I'm not like a super religious guy. Growing up Catholic, that's kind of hammered into your head and stuff. I have some stuff from like different religions, like blessed, like Buddhist malas and like a blessed St. Michael statue, and just, little stuff like that from different cultures and religions from like my travels and stuff. I just always pick them up and kind of have a shelf that I keep them all on, like a little like altar type thing that feel like some good like protection energy is not a bad thing to have around.
Oh, certainly not.
So yeah, who knows? It's kind of a weird way that this all kind of tied in. Then even with talking to you guys after things, I don't know if it's necessarily like picking up around here or anything like that. Like I said, it could have been, it's a big old house. It could have been, the wind knocking weird or an echo of something, but it sounded, it sounded like a dude walking around in the house.
Right.
Pete and Mike, what bothers me, but it's also it's frightening, but it's also so interesting. I mean, if you're from a certain culture or subculture, and you just share a common ground on a lot of things, I mean, you will, in my opinion, you will be more attracted to certain subjects. But I'm thinking about that street where you first saw that Hatman, and then I mean, a street anywhere in the Western world, it's people from all walks of life, all ages, etc., and different couples, different houses, different people. One person that you stumble across later on in life described the same thing: the Hatman and the shadow people. That's weird. That's different.
Well, it's almost like it was meant to be, I guess, when you just come across these people and make these connections. There's something drew you guys together to get that conversation out.
Yeah, and I almost wonder, again, like people, with all the, TV kind of like trivializing this stuff with all the ghost hunter shows and all that kind of thing, and it's like kind of like such in the public mind these days. I feel like people might be a little more comfortable talking about their experiences.
Yeah, whereas like 30, 40 years ago would be you'd be ostracized for a lot of these things. Never mind 100 years ago, you'd be banished into the woods somewhere.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, so yeah, it kind of it's neat to see where it's going because there was always coast to coast growing up.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it wasn't until maybe the past 10 years that it was really like all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my favorite, like listening to the Art Bell show years ago, staying up at 2 a.m, put on the AM radio and listening to these stories and these phone calls that were coming in with these like every conspiracy theory to the supernatural and ghosts, and one of the best shows ever for me, that formed a lot of my interests later on in life. And Art Bell just recently passed, I think.
Yes.
Like 2 months ago or a month ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep waiting for him to call in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, told you guys.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's kind of, that's really all I got. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a lot, Mike. That was a great long story and tying in a lot of the common theme through it all. Really, really enjoyed listening.
Yeah,
to
Mike,
it
this was so
and
interesting.
talking
It was so
about it.
good.
thank you. Yeah, it's like I said, there's stuff that's like on Aaron's episode when he was talking about that stuff that went down at Jamie's folks' house. Like I was there for that, and I remember us discussing that. I was like, holy shit! Like, how'd I miss this one?
Right.
Like talking to him about stuff over the years, and yeah, you're right. It is like people you're drawn to. Very interesting.
With you, I think it's going to keep happening.
Yeah.
like a lot of other people we know, and even including myself, it's just like a constantly changing and morphing world of new discoveries and sightings and feelings. It never truly leaves, especially with people that seem to be a bit more drawn to that or susceptible to feeling these things. And you have like hot moments, where things feel like for a week or two is just endless, and then it can go away for a year or 5 years. But there's always something that's lurking, I think. And
Yeah.
it truly never leaves.
Yeah, I think if you have that little bit of the window, it's sometimes the
Mhm.
shutters are down, sometimes they're not.
Yep.
Mike, for people to, for listeners that might want to check out the records where you have dealt a little bit with these issues, which records should they look into then, or which record?
Mostly the Prowl stuff.
Yeah.
There's a bit like the first 2 Prowl records, probably not so much about this stuff. It's a little more horror movie and whiny, angsty brat shit. But the first record that I really got into it on was the Painkiller record, called The First Room on the Left. I mean, that song in particular kind of talks about a lot of this stuff thrown into, kind of drawing from a lot of these experiences and feelings thrown in. And then throughout the rest of like the stuff we did with that band, the more it went on, the more it was just kind of like figuring out a way to talk about this stuff.
Great. The First Room on the Left.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very good. Mikey Flynn, thanks so much for talking with us tonight. We had a really great time, and you were an awesome guest. Kept it rolling. We didn't even have to say much. I don't think you had a really good continuous story, and it was fucking awesome to have you on here, man. So thank you very much.
Gentlemen, thank you guys. You guys are doing such an awesome job with this podcast. I can't wait for each one to come out. Like I'm kind of not looking forward to having to listen to one with me just to listen to it.
It's gonna be good. People are really gonna enjoy it, and yeah, thanks so much for listening to the show and enjoying it and being a fan and a guest too. Couldn't ask for anything more.
No, this was one for the books. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, thanks. And if anybody's seen the Hat Man, get at me. Like to swap some stories.
Well, you'll be the first we contact, believe me.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Anything else, Klaus?
No, thanks, Pete. And thank you so much, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
All right, take care.
Cheers.